Good morning. My name is Nicole Linder, and I am joined with some of my team members here. I'm the Executive Director of Marjaree Mason Center, and I will be co-presenting today with our Deputy Director, Leticia Campos, and then we're joined by two of our awesome outreach and prevention team members, Jessica Saylor and Celia Malagon. And we're excited to be here with you today. If I have a few nerves, my husband has been teaching at Fresno City College for starting his 21st year, and I've never presented in front of him. So bear with me if I start to stutter a little bit. Leticia, would you like to say anything before we get started?
No, just thank you for having us. We're excited to be here. It's the first time we're presenting for your Flex Day, and thank you for all you do. My journey, my social work journey started with Fresno City College, so thank you for all that you do.
I'm going to try to share my screen real quick and get started with our PowerPoint. Okay, can you see my screen? Okay. All right, so thank you so much. Again, yes, Leticia said this is our first time presenting for City College, so we're really excited for a whole host of reasons. Today, we're going to do an overview of domestic violence in order for you to be able to identify and support both students and staff at Fresno City College. Our presentation will include understanding of domestic violence, identification of red flags, the cycle of violence, abuse in teen relationships. I know you have students of all ages, but teen relationships are different, impact on children, safety planning, and how to refer people to Marjaree Mason Center for support. Why is knowing about domestic violence important? One, safety for both you and for the other person who might be in an abusive relationship. You have to not be watching the news to see that we've had a lot of very, very serious domestic violence incidents since the beginning of 2021 that have been very public and high profile. Many involve weapons. And so we just want to make sure that we keep all of you safe. Based on numbers alone, a large percentage probably of your students, faculty, and staff at Fresno City College have probably experienced domestic violence, or some point in their lifetime they will. It will impact attendance, performance, social, emotional well-being, but it will trickle down into the classroom. And sometimes, and you know this, for those of you that have been in education long enough, a school professional might be the only person that a survivor will feel safe enough to tell. So what is domestic violence? I think most of us think of, if we haven't had any sort of education or experience, we think of domestic violence as a black eye or a bruise or some sort of a physical altercation. We usually think of it in the way of a cisgender heterosexual relationship, and a man is violent with a woman. But when you dissect domestic violence down, it is just a pattern of abusive behavior in any intimate relationship that is used by one partner to either gain or maintain power and control over another intimate partner. So I'm going to hand this over to Leticia now.
We're going to go over the different types of abuse. I always tell everybody, if I had 10 hours, I would be able to stay on just this topic alone. But I'm going to give you some examples. And by all means, the list is not exhaustive, but more of some common themes that we see walk through our doors and the different types of abuse that we see. So the first one that you see here is the physical aspect. Physical abuse, Nicole just mentioned, a lot of folks believe that domestic violence is just physical, a black eye, a broken arm, a broken leg. Physically harmed by an object. It can be pulling of the hair, it can be biting. We hear a lot of cases where folks come through and they have bite marks on themselves. Most of the time the bite marks are in areas that you can't see. So maybe an arm where the blouse can cover it up, the legs, the inner thighs, and so forth. A lot of the things that we hear too are the flicking of or burning of the cigarette butts on folks as well. It does encompass the typical hitting and the bruises and the black eyes. A lot of the time we see individuals get into altercations into their car. So a vehicle is also used as a physical form to harm the other person, where the victim is being thrown out of their car, being run over by the car, or we refer to the term as whiplash. So maybe pumping on the brakes and they are hitting their head on the dashboard. Emotional abuse, emotional psychological abuse, putting down, calling them names, belittling. You guys have probably heard the term gaslighting. Gaslighting is very much prevalent in domestic violence, just really belittling and diminishing one's abilities overall. Some of the things that we hear is, I'm told I'm not good enough. I'm told, why am I going to school? Why are you going to college? You're not going to pursue anything. You're not smart enough. Economic abuse, withholding of one's funds. That's the common one. Withholding of all access to money. I often talk about the unrealistic allowance that is provided to clients. And when I say that, all of the examples I'm giving are real life examples. So when it comes to unrealistic allowances, we have heard that victims are given maybe $5 to $10 a month and are told, figure out what to do with this and how to put food on our table with $5 to $10 a month. Sexual abuse, we oftentimes, this is the category that is not often talked about because of the shame and the guilt and the embarrassment that comes with sexual abuse. So oftentimes when we're speaking of victims of domestic violence, we have to tread lightly and cautiously when we're speaking about sexual abuse, but that does encompass unwanted touch, rape. No is no, right? Even if you're married. A lot of the times we have individuals that come in that are married that say it's my marital obligation to have sex with this individual if they want it, when they want it. But we're here to reinforce that if they're saying no, and that's something that they are not wanting to do, they do not have to do that, and it is considered rape. Making sexual advances. Oftentimes what we don't think about is couples, abusers, what they'll do is they will force their partner to engage in sexual activities with other people. So with friends, sometimes for monetary value, sometimes just because that's what they want to do. So we see that oftentimes as well, but we don't often hear it unless we're talking about it and bring it to the forefront with the client. Psychological, I touched on that with the emotional. Again, this goes into the manipulation tactic. Nicole had mentioned the power and control dynamic. There's always there's a method to the madness of domestic violence. I need to manipulate and bring you all the way down in order to gain that control from you. So manipulation, gaslighting, making you feel as though you don't have anybody else but me if I'm the abusive partner. Technology and stalking is a huge one. We talk about this every single day. Nowadays, I was going to look for my cell phone and hold it up. The cell phone, right? Whether with our younger crowd, with our teens, all the way through college into adulthood, everything is on that cell phone. So blowing up the cell phone with countless text messages, social media. For those of you that are tech savvy, I am not, but for those of you that are tech savvy, spyware is often installed in one's phone. And if I'm the abusive partner, depending on the app that I can install without the victim noticing, I can see all of the text messages. I can see where they're traveling to. I can see who's calling them, their email accounts, and so forth. So oftentimes when we're safety planning with our clients, one of the first things we say is, do you have your location turned off? Because tracking devices are a form of abuse and a form of control. Spiritual and cultural abuse, we talk on this a lot. This has come up more often lately. Utilizing spiritual beliefs and to justify the abuse. So depending on one's own faith, the abusive partner could take it and what I hear clients say is they twist it to where it makes me feel guilty, like I'm going beyond. I'm not upholding my faith or my religious practices. Some of those examples could be preventing one from practicing in their ceremonies, belittling the victim's spiritual or cultural worth, beliefs, or practices. When it comes to the LGBTQ community, when we go into the cultural piece, it could be using offensive pronouns for the individual. It could be that maybe I'm in a same-sex relationship, but I haven't come out to my family or friends. And if I'm the abusive partner, I'm threatening to out you, for lack of better words. And then withholding access to gender orientation, affirming care, and culturally . down some common types of abuse that we see. The continuum of violence, this isn't, I always say this isn't to scare anybody. This is a real life example of where abuse can start and what it can lead to. Okay, so when it comes to the physical abuse, it can start with some pushing, punching, slapping, kicking. I had mentioned the throwing of objects, the strangulation. I didn't mention that in the physical piece, but strangulation is prevalent in domestic violence cases. But then it can lead to what we fear the most, especially here at Marjaree Mason Center, is death of a victim. When it comes to the emotional, psychological abuse, it starts with some name calling, criticizing, putting down, ignoring, yelling. Isolation from family and friends is huge. That's the main tactic for abusive partners, is I need to isolate you from every support system that you have, because the likelihood of you leaving me with no support system intact, it becomes slim. And then ultimately, unfortunately, what we fear most is suicide off of the emotional, psychological abuse. When I say suicide, I'm not talking about just from the victim, but unfortunately from, we've seen a lot of murder suicides, and oftentimes they do involve a domestic violence relationship. And then the next one is when it comes down to sexual abuse. So I had mentioned unwanted touching, sexual name calling, false accusations, rape. What it gets to is rape for sex. Infidelity, I wanted to touch on that really quickly. Not a lot of folks believe that infidelity is a form of domestic violence, but the psychological ramifications that are attached to infidelity, in addition to all of the other abuse that is going on, does impact the victim. All right, the cycle of violence. The wheel that I just dislike the most. Some of you may have seen this before, but the cycle of violence, it starts with when you get into a relationship, right? Nobody ever gets into a relationship thinking, okay, this person is going to abuse me, right? When you get into a relationship, you're attracted to the person. You have maybe the person makes you feel good. Those, right? I'm going to use an old school term, those butterflies in your, I just aged myself, the butterflies in your stomach. I can't wait to see this person. I'm constantly wanting to be around this person. And then within the honeymoon stage, there could be, and we'll go into it in just a little bit, there could be some red flags that are already popping up, but they're masked behind all of those good feelings. And in an abusive relationship, from the honeymoon stage, it then goes into tension building. This piece feels as though the victim is walking on eggshells. A lot of stress is accompanied by it. The abusive partner shows and displays the need for that power and control in one way or another. And I want to be clear, it doesn't always have to mean that there's physical attached to that. It could be just a form of intimidation. That could be with the way that they look at the person. It could be the way that they're yelling at the person. It could be as simple as a stance, the way that they're standing. I had a client tell me one time that her and her kids knew if it was going to be a bad day just by the way that he slammed the car door as he was getting home from work. So that is the tension building that they were feeling at that moment. And then after tension building, we go into acute explosion, and that is where everything, the abusive partner just loses control, and it could be the form of physical violence. Most oftentimes it is the throwing of objects, the destruction of property, and so forth. In the middle of all of that is the denial. And the denial phase is for the victim, the 1 foot out, 1 foot in method I call. I want to leave. I don't know how to leave. Am I doing the right thing? What if I'm overreacting? He says, or she says, I'm the crazy one. I have kids with this person. And they're constantly in denial of the relationship, always hoping that it's going to go back to that honeymoon phase, because that is the stage that they most valued. And that is a stage that they remember. And that stage gives them hope that it can go back to the way that it used to be. So some red flags. There's always red flags at the start of an abusive relationship. But like I said earlier, a lot of that honeymoon phase will mask those red flags. So again, not an exhaustive list, but just some to keep in mind. So feeling like you're being controlled, telling you how to dress, who you can see, whether or not you can even go to school, whether or not you can have a job. Some of the things that we hear is, well, they said I have to stay home with the kids. I'm the one that has to take care of the kids, so I can't have a job. Or I'm being told that I just want a job, or I just want to go to school to meet other people. Or I just want to go to school or work so that way I can cheat on them, right? We talk about those false accusations that come up. Having a partner with a low self-esteem or who expresses feelings of inadequacy or powerlessness. Oftentimes we educate our clients on the fact that abusive partners do that manipulation tactic where they'll tell the victim, you know, you're the only one who knows me, please. I've just grown up in a really harsh environment, and you're the only one that can help me and save me. Huge red flag for us whenever we hear those comments. A sense that your partner is objectifying you, treating you more like your property than anything. And oftentimes we'll hear that the partner has said, you're my property, you're mine and only mine. Nobody else can look at you, nobody else can talk to you. You're gonna wear what I want you to wear, you're gonna look how I want you to look. And then blames outbursts on a stressful job, family drama, drinking too much, or just having a bad day. We won't go into myths today, but typically we talk about myths of domestic violence. And one of those myths is that it's an anger management issue, or it's simply an alcohol or drug issue. And that is not the problem. Those things can intensify the domestic violence, but that is not the core reason for the domestic violence. As we said earlier, the power and control is what drives the domestic violence.
And Leticia, if I can say something before you continue with red flags, where you will see it in other people, right? Sometimes it's a lot harder to see it in your own relationship and much easier to see in other people is key things like somebody is agitated when their cell phone buzzes and it's their partner. And no matter what they're doing, they feel like they have to respond in that instance. Another would be you hear words like my wife or my girlfriend won't let me. My boyfriend doesn't like it when. Those kinds of things where you really can tell they want to go do something, right? Maybe this is a young student in your class and they're vibrant and they're outgoing and they have lots of friends and they have big social groups. And all of a sudden they stop going to doing things after class. They stop participating in study groups. They stop participating in whatever the club or the dance or activity it was that they were a huge part of. And they said, well, you know, I really want to spend time with my boyfriend or girlfriend, and they don't like it because it takes away from that. Those are red flags that you will likely hear in a school setting. Or
the, I have to share my location all of the time with them, right? Especially within our youth and those that are in college. I constantly share my location. A lot of you that have social media, I'm going to butcher this, Snapchat comes to mind for me. You always have, there's a location tracking device on Snapchat if you have that piece on. And if I'm the victim, I constantly have to share my location because they're worried about me, right? That's what they're worried about me. They want to make sure I'm okay. And then some more red flags here, makes you feel responsible for the outbursts or assaults. Again, manipulation, turning it around on the other person. If you had not did this, I would not have acted this way. So this is your fault. Constantly is putting you down or calling you names. I had a client, a fairly younger client come through, was in college, and she had mentioned, you know, whenever I put even just lip gloss or lipstick on, he tells me, why are you getting dressed up today? Who are you going to go see? Who are you trying to impress? You don't even look good like that. Take that off. This one, the next one is a huge one. When there's children in the relationship, it makes it much harder for the victim to leave, especially when the abusive partner is threatening to take away the children from them. Oftentimes we hear clients come in that say, I have 3 children, and when I go to the store, I have to take 1 and leave 2, because that they know that I'm going to return for my kiddos and I'm not going to leave my kids behind. And again, the hitting, the shoving, the physical abuse is a huge red flag. It might start off with some subtle pushes, and then it intensifies from there. Threats to actually hurt the children or pets. Pets is a common, I can't express enough. Pets is a common form of power and control and abuse. We've had a lot of clients that have walked through our doors, all ages, that have said, my abusive partner has harmed my pet or has killed my pet, because they knew how close I was to my pet. For everything from cats to dogs. I'm not kidding. I met with, there was a little 5-year-old that we had that had a goldfish. And daddy said she couldn't take the goldfish with her. Threatens to kill themselves or you. If you leave me, I have nothing else to live for, and I might as well take my own life, but I can't live without you either. So they will threaten to kill the victim and their children. And then forces you to do things sexually that you're not comfortable with. And we did talk about that earlier in the sexual piece. I do want to point out, somebody left a comment here on the chat. It looks like Renee says, creating situations when victims must choose between devotion to the abuser and achievement of victim goals. Another form of psychological abuse is the abuser threatening to harm or carrying out harm, right? Which is what we just said right now as well. And then learn hopelessness. Hopefulness fuels the cycle of violence for sure. The hope. I always say I can never compete with the hope that one has that their relationship will get better. And I'll hand this one to Nicole.
Let me unmute myself. See, I don't teach regularly, so the multitasking of running a PowerPoint and unmuting isn't as fluid for me. So obstacles to leaving. I can't express how often I hear, I would never stay in a relationship where somebody was abusive, right? I would never let somebody hit me. I don't know why women just don't leave. We hear that all the time, right? It's super common. But there's a lot of obstacles to leaving. First and foremost, it's the most dangerous thing somebody can do. About 70 to 75% of homicides happen when somebody leaves or threatens to leave. And so it is the very most dangerous thing to do, especially in a relationship that is deeply rooted in power and control. But there's a lot of other things. In relationships where there is one income provider in the household, there's complete economic dependence on the abusive partner. Sometimes, and we do see this a lot, even people where they're both parties, so the person who is the victim is in an abusive relationship but has a job, the power and control in the relationship is so severe that they have zero access to even the money they earn. There's a complete lack of awareness of resources, right? Where will I go? What will I do? It's the whole reason the Marjaree Mason Center was launched and started over 40 years ago in the first place. Social isolation, one intentional by the abusive partner, and the other unintentional, but by loved ones who have really grown weary of watching somebody they love go through this over and over and saying, like, I told them to leave, I gave them an out, I gave them a place to go, and they don't ever listen. And so for their own protective barriers, they create this like distance between them and their loved ones, right? And then children. I do not know a single parent who just doesn't love and adore their children and would give up their own life for their children. And so they can't imagine a situation where they would be separated from their children. Fear, the psychological, obviously, the anxiety of the physical danger. One thing that I don't think we have in this presentation, but at the center, we do a risk assessment. And it's a law enforcement based evidence-based assessment on a person's likelihood of being killed should they stay in that relationship. And so there are real factors that have an impact on whether or not their life could be taken that maybe are beyond what you would think, like having a child that is not in common, that the abuser knows is not theirs. Obviously using alcohol, having a weapon. Maybe they've never threatened somebody with a weapon, but just having access to a gun. So there's a lot of fears, but really at some point, I know Leticia talked about that cycle of violence, a person really starts to believe, if only I did this better, or I figured it out. We had a speaker for one of our large events that we do in October, our top 10 professional women awards. And one of our speakers one year was Ruthie Bolton. She played in the WNBA. She had Olympic gold medals in basketball. She did more push-ups that day than the police chief. And she talked about thinking that if I worked as hard in my marriage, that she would probably be able to figure it out because it worked in basketball. So for those of you who have student athletes, there is that driven mentality, or people who are just driven in nature to say, I just need to figure this out. I need to avoid the triggers. I need to do other things. And so they really feel like they can figure it out. Sadness over just a relationship ending. Nobody goes into a relationship planning for it to end. And for those of us in very traditional cultures, there are long-term ramifications that go beyond this lifetime that we're taught and told are reasons to stay in an abusive relationship. I've listed some others there, but I'm going to try and go a little faster so we have time for questions. Impact on children. I think one of the largest challenges, and this is our first kind of sound video, so I'm going to test this out and see if it plays today, is that most people who will come to the Marjaree Mason Center say, my kids didn't hear anything. I promise they didn't hear anything. They didn't see anything. I really protected them because as parents, that's our high priority. But at the end of the day, I'm going to play a phone call, a 911 phone call for you. And I've got some pictures as well. Kids very much are present. Even in the womb, kids are exposed to trauma, and it has long-term implications on them. It's estimated that 70 to 75% of households that law enforcement responds to involve households with children. And we're working really hard as an agency to figure out how to capture that data locally. But I'm going to see if I could play this video. If you can give me a thumbs up, Leticia, if you can hear it.
Okay. 6:18 and 10 seconds.
911, state your emergency. Hello?
My mom, she's crying.
Why is she crying?
My dad,
What about,
she's hitting her.
how old are you?
9.
Okay, what's your name, honey?
Crystal,
What's your last name, Crystal?
Cortez,
You're okay, all right? You think he's hitting her?
yeah.
Did you see him hit her?
No, but I hear her screaming.
Where are they?
In the apartment
Okay, where are you?
next door.
You went next door?
Yeah.
Okay, do they know you left?
Yes.
Do they know you're calling the police?
Yes. My next door neighbor said that to call the police.
Oh, honey, I'm sorry. We'll get an officer out there, but can you stay on the line with me for a minute?
Yeah.
So Crystal didn't see it, right? She actually said to the 911 dispatcher, she didn't see her dad hitting her mom. Does Crystal feel it? She does, right? How do you think Crystal's gonna feel showing up to school the next day? How's she gonna do taking the math exam or the English test? Most of our families in Fresno are multi-generational. So how many of you might have an 18-year-old or probably even a younger 17-year-old in your classes who is experiencing the same thing at home and maybe is having to take care of younger sister or mom before they're showing up for your class or your exam, right? So children who are exposed to domestic violence, they would obviously hear it, we talk about it, they live with the aftermath, right? Leticia talked about maybe nobody was physically hurt, but the walls have been punched through, or somebody was mad and crashed the car, or maybe took their stuff and they're displaced and they're off in somebody's house. When people come to the Marjaree Mason Center, they literally come here with nothing. So they show up, they've left everything behind. It takes almost 30 days to get a court date for a restraining order. And that's horrible. It's super hard on these families. they begin to be affected by the same messages. And at this point, those who are living in a household where they're regularly exposed to domestic violence are at high risk of one, either repeating abusive behaviors or being in an abusive relationship. So this is some art that we see in our enrichment center. And I share this because, you know, it's a reminder to all of us. Kids hear our words. They hear what we say. They know what's going on. And I think it's a reminder. We think of them as little humans and they won't know or process or understand. But unfortunately, if we're training them with adult type trauma at a young age, it sticks with them throughout their lifetime. I'm gonna hand this to Leticia.
Nicole, I have a question before you move on from talking about children, please.
Yes.
What is the stance of our local juvenile court judges regarding taking children who are in relationships where there's intimate partner violence, taking those children into protective custody? How frequently is that happening today?
Leticia, you want to take that question?
And what kinds of, and for what length of time are alternative supports offered to the victim? Or is there the stance that you let this happen, your kids are being taken into protective custody? Maybe there's one chance, but but the victim might be told, okay, we're going to help you to execute a plan to leave. You have an opportunity to carry that plan out. And if you don't, we're taking your children. So I'm wondering what the stance of juvenile court judges are, not only in Fresno County, but other counties in Central California.
Sure. Okay, that's a great question. It's a loaded question, but it's a great question. I was actually just talking to Nicole a little bit, something similar yesterday about this. So in our experience just with Marjaree Mason Center, we work closely with, at times we work closely with Child Protective Services. You said it, you just hit it at the end when you said, do they give them a chance to get out of the relationship and seek safety and try to do better for themselves and their kids? And the answer is sometimes yes and sometimes no, right? So depending on, I have seen it, I've worked with a lot of clients and I still see it till this day where they will have CPS involved because maybe a neighbor, a teacher, a counselor, a therapist has called and reported the domestic violence. And depending, this is the reality of it. Depending on the response from Protective Services and their recommendation in moving forward, at that moment in time, they could say, you know what, we're going to take the kids into protective custody. Oftentimes they're calling us and asking us to sit in team decision meetings where we're offering services for the victim. And at that point, if the victim accepts the services, CPS will often say, we're going to give you a chance to get out of the relationship, to get out of the home, get a restraining order, work with Marjaree Mason Center. They will remove. I have seen it to where they have removed. Don't have a number, and that's something I've already notated. That's something that I could probably get and explore. I don't have a number on the percentage of how many are removed and how many are not, how many are given a chance. I just know in my 10 plus years of being here that oftentimes I see them wanting to give them a chance unless it is extremely severe. The abuse was so severe that it's physically abusive towards the children as well, and the child has been harmed. But they do work closely with them and give them a chance, or they're enrolling them in what's called a family voluntary maintenance program, where there's an open CPS case. Haven't removed the kids yet, but it's almost like you're on the verge of it, but we're gonna work with you on that. I told Nicole yesterday that unfortunately, one of the things that I would love to advocate more for is the fact that if a teen kiddo is not tied to a system and they are going through domestic violence in their homes, but it's not quite at the point of removal, right? So it's just, it's unhealthy overall. There isn't really a lot of support out there for them unless you're tied to some type of system, unless you are in the juvenile system, unless you are in the CPS system, the protective service system. So That's what we see on our end. And we do work closely with protective services. All right, safety planning. So again, not exhaustive. This is in an emergency situation. This is oftentimes what we are educating our clients on. This one that you see here is, I feel like can be a safety plan for anybody, right? Anybody can utilize this. Please know that with every client that walks through our doors, though, every safety plan is tailored to their specific and unique situation. Oftentimes I give the example of a city client versus a rural area client, and why would the safety plan look different between those two? What it comes down to is access, right? The quick access to services in the city. So with this, in an emergency, we tell clients, make sure if there's any injuries, if there's any bruises, take pictures of those and save those pictures. Try not to wear scarves or long jewelry, especially if you know that there's a constant altercation between you and this person, because those things can be used to harm you. If during that tension building phase, if you can tell that there's going to be an explosion, get away from the kitchen where there's a lot of sharp objects and knives. Those things will hurt you. A lot of the times there's pots, pans that are thrown and used as weapons. Nicole had mentioned weapons earlier with the gun. When we talk about weapons, please know that we're talking about a variety of different objects that can hurt you, not just guns, not just knives, but anything that could be used as a weapon, right? I hear cell phones are used as a weapon all of the time, irons that are being thrown across the room. So we stay away from the kitchen. I don't know what it is, but a common thing that we see is when someone's in trouble, the first thing they want to do is hide behind a door. They're running to the bathroom, they're running to the closet, they're running to a small space. And we want them to do the opposite. We want them to get out safely and exit, find an exit route. Because I guarantee you that person, if you're running to the bathroom, is going to get there before you, and now they've just cornered you. A lot of physical altercations take place in the bathroom, and it's because the victim has ran straight to the bathroom. I've heard of concussions because they hit their head up against the tub, up against the toilet, mirrors breaking, and so forth. Get to a room where there's a phone where you can call for help, call 911, and like I said, try to get to an exit as fast as possible. And plan that out with your kids if you can. Plan out how they're going to call 911. Plan out in an emergency. Code words. If you have to use code words with your family, do that as well. Teen dating violence, what is that? Okay, so you guys at Fresno City College, you guys are gonna get, right, the out of high school teens that are coming in, and most of them may be in a relationship, and a lot of them may be in an unhealthy relationship. So what is teen dating violence overall? This really quickly, sorry. In a nutshell, you guys, nothing is different from, a lot of people believe that something is different with teen abuse versus just abuse in general. All of the same characteristics, all of the same types of abuse is the same. It mirrors on over to our teens. Unfortunately, with our younger crowd and with the teens, especially if they're in a home already where they're experiencing it with their own family, with their own parents, they normalize it. So they get into these relationships feeling as though this is normal, this is the way that my parents, or this is the way my mom, or this is the way my dad is in their own relationships. So let me go ahead and just get straight to the video here so you can get a glimpse of what we're talking about.
My teen dating experience began at a very young age.
There was a boy, and I was in middle school.
And right when I saw her, I knew, I'm gonna date that girl.
He was very nice. He would compliment me. He said that he really liked me.
He was mysterious.
We met and fell in love all within a matter of 2 weeks, and things kind of started.
Instant gut feeling that she was not good for me. I didn't listen to that gut feeling, and that was where it first went wrong.
He started controlling me and telling me what I could wear and what I couldn't wear.
You need to text me at all times. I need to know where you're at all times.
It began to be emotionally and mentally manipulative.
He would start asking me if I could use my friend's phone to like send him nude pictures.
I will tell my girlfriend, oh, that's good. He's jealous, right? That means he really likes me.
She degraded me with names. Why are you being such a Why are you being such a Pretty soon you start believing that about yourself. And so then I began to act that way. I began to let her walk all over me.
Day after day, he constantly asked me, can we have intercourse? Can we have intercourse? Can we have sex? And I said, no, no.
It really felt as if being controlled meant that he loved me. I thought that that's just how relationships were supposed to be.
You're not smart enough. You will never make it in life. You will end up just like your mother, cleaning houses. He knew how to put me down.
He proceeded to throw me down on the ground again, and he put his forearm across my throat and spit in my face.
Get off of me. I don't want this. He put all of his body weight on me and just finished his job. He had just finished raping me.
I don't know. It's just you find yourself in the situation and you don't even realize how bad it is.
I thought that stereotypically that the men were the abusers and the women were the victims, but I never thought about teens. I never thought about young people. I felt stuck. I felt like I didn't have a voice.
So I think that all of them just hit it spot on, right? I think that that's just, I thought that was the way that a relationship was supposed to be. I believed the person, what they were telling me. And it diminishes at such a young age, it continues to diminish their sense of self-worth, which fuels even more the reason as to why they may maintain the relationship and stay. So here's the next one that we're going to show here.
I met him on the very first day of high school.
I met him at a speech and debate tournament.
I met him at my friend's party. I liked him so much. He was really funny. He had it going on. He was fly.
He knew everything about everything. And he liked me too.
He'd walk me home. He was always cracking me up. He got my number and was texting me all the time, like always thinking about me. I was so excited.
He told me I was smart and hot and that he wanted to be with me.
When we got together, that was my boo, my man.
I couldn't believe how lucky I was to have found him.
At first, everything was great. We were always chilling, always together.
He was really sweet, really thoughtful. No one had ever talked to me like that before.
I guess I didn't really notice when things started to change. He'd be texting me like all the time. He'd get kind of pissed off if I didn't text him back right away. He'd get a little pouty and cranky when I'd hang out with my friends or family instead of him, but, you know, he missed me, and that was really sweet.
He started getting really possessive.
He started getting really possessive. My best friend was a guy. You know, we'd been tight since we were kids. But my boyfriend was always saying not to trust my friend, that he was gonna put a move on me, that I should stay away from him.
He hated how serious I was about the debate team and would yell at me about that sometimes. He'd text me the whole time I was at practice.
He'd ask me to text him some nasty pictures. It didn't feel right, but I sent him some of my underwear anyway. He put one on Facebook being all like, this is my princess, she's mine for life. He also told me I dressed too sexy, that I looked slutty. I got mad about the picture being on Facebook. He's like, oh, you're my girl, I want the world to know. But then when people like the picture, he come up to me like, who's that? Do you know him? I'm like, what? He'd grill me every time I hung out with my friends or family. He'd want to know where we went, what we did, who was there, and would try to mix me up and catch me in a lie.
He accused me of cheating on him. I had no idea where it was coming from.
I wasn't hiding anything.
It seemed to come out of nowhere.
Every morning, I'd text him a picture with what I was wearing, and he'd let me know if it was okay. I was confused. I kind of laughed it off. I mean, it was sweet that he wanted to show me off and fight over me, but I don't know, I guess I did kind of overreact.
So I tried to make things better. I decided to just go ahead and do what he wanted. I quit the debate team.
I didn't understand what he was so worried about. I thought that maybe I wasn't giving him enough attention.
I felt stupid for beefing with him about a picture. So I texted him some naked pictures to show I wasn't mad.
No, I didn't want to fight with him. So I just mostly stopped hanging out with my other friends.
But it didn't work.
I felt like I was walking on eggshells all the time.
Ever since I sent him those stupid pictures, he just keeps threatening me that he'll send them around to everyone.
I needed his permission to do anything. I knew it had gone too far when I was leaving town for my cousin's wedding. He said he'd out me to everyone if I didn't stay. He screamed, told me I wasn't allowed to go.
He got so mad, he grabbed me, shook me hard, and slapped me in the face.
He decided he didn't want to use a condom anymore. I said I was worried about the stuff they talked about in health class, and he got mad at me. He pinned me down, he forced me, like, it actually hurt, and I cried the whole time.
I was absolutely horrified.
He tried to apologize.
He tried to apologize. That he loves me.
That he was sorry and it wouldn't happen again.
He brought me flowers. He said he didn't know why he got so angry.
He just gets afraid about losing me. He doesn't want to live without me.
I just don't know who to talk to.
I don't know who to talk to.
I wish I could talk to my parents, but they'd be disappointed in me for having sex in the first place.
All my friends are mad at me for ditching them for him.
I wish I could talk to somebody at school.
How am I supposed to tell them? They don't know I'm gay.
I'm not sure if they'd even believe me.
I would never tell them.
I'm so confused.
I'm so confused.
He loves me.
He's my boyfriend.
He means so much to me.
But he hurt me.
I'm so afraid of him.
He's disrespectful to me.
Isn't it my fault?
I'm so embarrassed.
I don't know what to do.
I feel stupid.
I don't think anyone else would want me.
He said he would change.
Maybe I should just wait it out.
I know he'll start treating me better.
Won't he?
Nicole, we have a question that I think we can answer, and then I can let you go into the next one, but it'll tie into what we're about to say here. It says, how do we get someone out of this kind of situation where they are in denial? He or she's not that bad, broke up, and ex still setting rules. He, she's my baby's daddy, mommy, just jealous, but doesn't do anything. And then Daniel, yes, Daniel, we'll put the links of the video. We can try to put the links of the video in the chat. So this is a common question, Maxine. This is actually probably the number one question that Marjaree Mason Center, all of us from Nicole's level all the way down to our line staff always get is, how do we get someone out of this kind of situation? And the unfortunate answer that nobody likes to hear is that we can't get someone out of it. We can only continue to encourage and support and be there for them as best as we can. And just know that that cycle, you're going to see it play out in front of you. We see it with our clients. It takes approximately about 7 times before a victim decides, that's it, I have to go. And even at that point, that's the most dangerous time, right, for them. So we see it play out in front of us day in and day out, where we have clients from 2009 walking through our doors still, 2005 years. We see children that were here with us coming through our doors because they are in unhealthy relationships. When I'm answering the hotline or when I'm getting clients and they're asking me the same question, get a parent in front of me and the parent says, I need my son or daughter out of this relationship. I need you to help me get them out. And I get it. Nicole had mentioned, as parents, we want nothing more than to protect our kiddos. Unfortunately, this is one of those situations where we absolutely have zero control of what the victim does because of how ugly that cycle is. And
I think if I can interject, you going through this training is a first step. So I think being aware and recognizing like what may be unhealthy, what may be a red flag, and the most important thing you can do is tell the person, like, I'm very concerned about you. I've been trained in this situation, and regardless of I want you to know that I'm concerned about you and I'm a safe person to talk to you, and I'll help you get connected to a place that can help you. Because even if they're not ready to leave, even if they're going to blow you off, at least they know when they are ready that you're a person that they can trust, that won't just say, oh, you just need to go, you just need to go apologize. Relationships are hard. Everybody fights, right? Because I think sometimes when somebody comes to us and they say, my boyfriend this, my girlfriend this, my husband this, my wife this, and for any of us that have been married for a long period of time, like there's always some conflict. And so sometimes we just generalize it and don't even get to specifics or actively listen. So I think the first thing you can do is get trained and be knowledgeable to recognize something is wrong, and that kind of like an iceberg situation, if you see the tip of it, there's probably a whole lot more going on underneath. And so just knowing how to tell somebody that you're concerned about them and you care, and then you're not going to walk away and give up on them when they finally are ready to leave, is probably the most important thing you can do.
Yeah, and just know that conversation might happen like 10 times too, right? So don't shut them out. That's the worst thing that you could probably do, is shut them out. And that's something that we tell families all the time, because we do get parents that will say, I'm just going to stop talking to them. That way they can get out of their relationship. But that's the worst thing that you can do. The best thing that you can do is be there and provide them with the resources. And if you need to, and they're wanting to, connect them to us. So that way we can take it from there and assist.
And I'm going to push through to resources because we only have about 20 minutes left, and I want to leave time for questions. But I think I want to acknowledge that again, people look at teenage relationships as something that is maybe, young love, something silly, but there's really, really dangerous things going on with teens. Leticia, I do want you to talk about this one because I feel like this is so heavily prevalent in teens, and then we'll move on to services.
Yeah, so abuse through technology, can't emphasize this enough. 30% of teens said that they were texted 10 to 30 times an hour. I think that number is low. I think it's oftentimes more than that. Constant text message. Nicole had mentioned this earlier. FaceTime, not just text message, but FaceTime. Now FaceTime, you got to answer your phone so I can see where you're at. So constantly tracking them, their every move is prevalent in teen dating violence as well. And they'll argue through text message. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I know you let your students bring cell phones into classes, right? Like if you see, like you're talking about something important and they're just saying that there's an emergency going on, maybe process with them, like, what is the emergency? Because oftentimes the emergency really wasn't an emergency. It's just the person is creating an emergency. And again, that's an opportunity for you to have a deeper conversation. Another one, which isn't on the slide, is transportation. So really, really prevalent in all ages is, I'm going to drive you everywhere. I'm going to drive you to work. I'm going to drive you to school. I'm going to pick you up. And sometimes that's just a means to an end. Like they only have one vehicle. Oftentimes in an abusive relationship, it's wanting to control, that they know that they got where they said they were going to go. I'm going to skip over this, but just an awareness. We don't think of people fleeing domestic violence as homeless, but they absolutely are. And by all federal definitions, they are. So you may not see somebody sleeping on the street. You may not know that they're homeless, but they, by definition, they are, because their own home is unsafe. I'm going to skip over this. We can come back to it, Leticia. Unless we can. You can go over a healthy relationship components. That would be awesome.
So elements of a healthy relationship, positive communication, positive boundaries, respecting one's own boundaries, not pushing them to do anything that they don't want to. Consent is huge. Trust and honesty go hand in hand. Again, those unrealistic expectations of a relationship and the constant false accusation. If you automatically aren't trusting your partner and you can't be honest with them, that should be a red flag. Independence and autonomy is a huge one, right? Relationships should make you grow together, and you should push one another to be the best that you can be within yourself, not diminish you. Equality, support, responsibility, healthy conflict. Nicole was saying all relationships have conflict, right? All relationships have disagreements, but how do we resolve those in a healthy manner? And then above all, safety at the top of that. I should feel safe in my relationship to talk to my partner. I should feel safe in my relationship that I'm not going to be harmed in my relationship or feel retaliated against if I do or say something that, that my partner doesn't approve of.
So a little bit about domestic violence in the US, nationwide statistics: 1 in 4 women, 1 in 7 men, which usually surprises people. And most terrifying is 1 in 3 teenagers are impacted by domestic violence in the United States. Most unknown to people is that Fresno is a hotspot. So of all of the largest cities in the state of California, the city of Fresno has the highest per capita rates for domestic violence to police. This is a 2018 stat. It has not changed, but it just means that we have extremely high volume of domestic violence calls to law enforcement in the city of Fresno. That could be seen as a good thing, right? Because it could mean that people are actually calling law enforcement so they feel safe to call, but nonetheless, it's a humongous issue in our community. Last year, there were over 8,000 calls to law enforcement. The average is 135 to 200 a week. This is just Fresno County. It does happen in every demographic. At the Marjaree Mason Center, we see clients from all areas of Fresno County. Our highest number of clients come from the 93727 zip code and the 93722 zip code on opposite ends of the city. And so far, there have been 8 shootings related to domestic violence this year and 3 domestic violence related deaths. So we want to leave you with resources. Marjaree Mason Center is Fresno County's designated nonprofit. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and through the California Office of Emergency Services, we're the designated response system and to provide services for victims in our community. Our mission statement is very, very laserly focused. We support and empower adults and children impacted by domestic violence and try to strive to prevent and end the cycle through education and advocacy. And I think what I really want to share is we serve all ends of the spectrum. So we serve the person who has been abused in the situation, the person that has caused harm, and the children. So what are our services? We have a 24/7 live person crisis support response. We have people on a hotline physically here, both at our admin office in downtown Fresno, also in the Fresno Police Department, the Sheriff's Office. They get dispatched out on calls often. For us, that's the most important thing, that we provide support when somebody is brave enough to call. We did change from just a phone number during COVID because obviously people couldn't call. We were having people reach out to us through social media messaging and saying, I can't pick up the phone and call work because they're all in the same house. And so we had to immediately pivot and create other access sites, and we'll share that with you at the end. Safe housing. The one thing is that people say, where will I go and what will I do? Because even if they call law enforcement and they are given an emergency protective order, it's still just a piece of paper. That's all it is. It means that the officers have more teeth if the person reoffends, but it's still just a piece of paper. So that emergency safe housing and longer term support is critical to make sure that, again, as I said, leaving is the most dangerous thing somebody can do. We take all genders, we take families and their dependents, whatever that looks like, because we want to make sure that the family unit is safe. We offer everything from emergency shelter, transitional, and longer term to help place people in their own apartments utilizing government grants. Individual and group counseling for adults and children, legal advocacy, going to court and facing somebody who you have children with and you've been married to for 20 years is extremely terrifying. We help people with their restraining orders, court accompaniment, and then training such as these. And then what we feel is probably the most important in our prevention program is working with kids who have been impacted by domestic violence. So we have enrichment centers, we have teen space areas, and then we have a child advocacy program that essentially assigns a case manager and support system for each child separate from their adult parent. So how do you access the Marjaree Mason Center? At the very, very bottom, if I could say that bottom bar is probably the most important thing for you to remember from this presentation, is our hotline number and email, which is 559-237-HELP or help@mmcenter.org. We place a lot of tools on our social media sites. One of our sites is Marjaree Mason Center, and the other one is No More Teen DV. So that's our Teen Dating Violence Prevention Program, and it's No, KNOWMORE. But we are spread out throughout Fresno County because we do serve the entire county. And then I just have a last video that I can share with you if there are no other questions. So I just kind of want to open it up for a few questions.
I just want to say really quickly, I have been seeing the comments that are coming through. Thank you to those of you. Sounds like many of you have experience with this, and obviously a lot of you have knowledge within this. If you guys want, if at any point you want a presentation for your own class, you can go to our website and there's a link that will take you to the presentation request, and we will most definitely be able to present for you and your students.
We have a question from Renee. She asked, can someone talk about law enforcement of the TROs, especially at Fresno City College campus when one or both in the relationship with students? Thank you.
That is probably the trickiest thing. So the restraining orders are meant by the courts to tell, kind of as a warning, both on college campuses or in even places of employment where both parties work for the same employer. It becomes extremely problematic. I think you'd have to encourage specific conversations with your Fresno City College campus police on how to provide appropriate safety measures, because by law they are entitled to those safety measures to keep them apart. So whether that means adjusting their class schedule, adjusting other things that would keep them away from each other. What you can't change is that they might still violate the restraining order. However, as an educational institution and a business, your legal obligation is to help fulfill the safety measurements of the restraining order. A lot of people have asked, this whole entire presentation is uploaded, so you should have access to all the videos or anything else. I'm just seeing the chat. I wasn't able to see it when I was, okay. A student checking his phone during an exam. The person next to him thought he was cheating. He showed a series of text messages. So Marianne, that's a great opportunity for you to have that conversation. I know you have a health center on campus. Maybe that's a great opportunity to start the conversation with your health center to say, like, how do we get the student some support? You can always refer the student to Marjaree Mason Center, but there should be dual support on campus. I think it's important to know that you can get a restraining order as young as 12 years old. And so I think a lot of times people think you must be, you have to be over 18, but you can get a restraining order as young as 12 years old. There's a comment in here about human trafficking. Absolutely, there's definitely an intersection of domestic violence and human trafficking. As Leticia had mentioned earlier, part of the power and control in the relationship is to say, I'm gonna make money off of you. And that same recruitment honeymoon period that is used in an abusive relationship is used by traffickers to recruit people into human trafficking. Absolutely, a lot of cases go reported. So thank you for bringing that up. The most challenging thing to understand, like the full grasp of domestic violence, is that nobody's required to call law enforcement. And it's not something that happens most of the time. So if you're looking at the statistics that we listed, it doesn't represent every instance of domestic violence. Most of it goes unreported. There are some people that don't feel comfortable calling the police. That's part of our reason, is to educate different circles and communities. So businesses and houses of worship and other parts of people's daily life and living are now safe places for survivors to reach out and get services. I know that there were a lot of questions when a lot of the ICE raids were happening about, what will happen if I'm not a documented citizen and I need to report this because I'm afraid for my life. And so we started doing some communication with law enforcement to say, we are here to keep people safe. Fresno PD is not a part of immigration. Their goal is to provide safety to our community, and Marjaree Mason Center doesn't make that a requirement here as well. Law enforcement TROs. Geraldine, go ahead.
I was going to say, we had a question from Loretta. What's the percentage of abusers that actually recover? For example, 2 years of non-abuse. Do most facilities like Marjaree Mason Center keep track of that information?
What is the percent of abusers that actually recover? No, we don't. What I will say is some history on nonprofits is most of us were started as social workers or individuals who had experience or just knew somebody that had been impacted. And like any nonprofit organization, we were birthed out of a need to just help people. And I think what you've seen, and I say that to remind you, Marjaree Mason Center is a nonprofit, is that more and more organizations are becoming data driven. The challenge in the question that Loretta asked is we are only one provider of batterers intervention, or we have anger management classes or child abuse classes for adults and teens, is that there are a lot of service providers in the community. And so there isn't really one place managing all of that outside of probably probation. And I know that through AB 109, there was a higher investment in doing some collective data analysis on what do they consider recovery, right? Does it mean you don't commit felony domestic violence, but maybe it's still misdemeanor domestic violence? And so there's even some identification of needing to understand what do we consider recovery from an abuse perspective. And do most facilities keep track of it? No, we don't keep track of that. We keep track of individuals that utilize our services, absolutely. Do you recommend? Go ahead.
Balin has a question. With so many classes still online, do you have any recommendations for supporting students in the online setting?
Yeah, absolutely. So most of our curriculum that we implement, so we're in Fresno Unified, Clovis, Central, Reedley, Sanger, Orange Cove high schools talking about teen dating violence. But we always have training opportunities that you can invite us into your classroom. That's what Jessica and Celia are going to be doing. But we had to pivot this year, obviously, because of COVID. And so we have online videos like the one we've shared, online PowerPoint trainings. And so it would just need to be requested through the Marjaree Mason Center, and that we can come and assist you with that. But yes, we have all learned to be online this year.
And Becky's wondering if demographic data is collected. If so, where can the participants find that information?
So demographic data is collected by Marjaree Mason Center on all of our clients only. Because of Federal Violence Against Women Act confidentiality laws, we cannot release that information, meaning there's no way to cross-reference our data with those who are at, for the Fresno PD or Clovis PD or Reedley PD, their law enforcement jurisdictions. We probably collect more data than they do because they're really responding to, like, is this an arrestable offense or not? And a lot of their data is a narrative form versus any sort of format that can be analyzed. And so I am working on that too, but we can make sure that we share with the college our annual data analytics that get published every year for the county.
And Karen's question is, what can teachers do if they suspect domestic violence is happening to one of their students?
Leticia, you want to take that? And I'll read the rest of the chat messages. I've got a few I'm trying to read right now.
I think we had covered this earlier. I would say if you're suspecting of it, find a safe place to maybe pull them in and talk to them. I would say, I wanted to mention earlier, but I didn't want to interject, talking to them, but not prying so much, right? Because prying and pushing can push somebody away, but maybe talk to them in a supportive manner, bring up maybe some things that you have noticed, some concerns that you've noted, and allow them that open space and safe place to talk to them. And then if they do open up to you, exactly what Nicole said earlier, right? You're coming to this training, invite us in to do a training for you all in your classes. provide them with the resources, let them know that there is help, they can get help, educate them a little bit on the psycho-violence and the power and control of it all. But really just open that space and dialogue with them so they can come to you again if that's what they need to do.
And the last question.
I've seen notes in the chat really quick about you have a system called Early Alert to connect students to resources. So making sure that you're using Early Alert. And Melinda brought up a really, really good tip is that you can always use somebody on campus to use a campus phone if it's allowable by Fresno City College, or your phone to contact the Marjaree Mason Center. Because as Leticia mentioned, most people's phones are being tracked. And so it's not even safe for them to use their own phone to track. And so finding a safe phone on campus to be able to contact and to speak with somebody at the center or law enforcement would be extremely important. But it sounds like you have an early alerts system to also get students referred over to counselors and services in the community would be great.
And the last question in the chat is from Becky. She's asking if the Marjaree Mason Center has data on domestic violence in the LGBTQ community.
You want to take that, Leticia?
Yeah, sorry, I was looking at the chat too. Yes, so Nicole had mentioned earlier, we keep our own internal data, and we do keep that, of course, as so long as the client is. We do a lot of self-report within the agency too, right? Self-report on finances and other situations that are going on. And one of those data components that we collect is if the client identifies within the LGBTQ+ community as well.
And the other is making sure that we're present in events and spaces in the LGBTQ+ community so that they understand that there's resources available to them. That's critically important. And then I'm going to say this, hopefully I'm saying this correctly, Garbral had asked about the church community, and absolutely we have been doing lots of trainings. So if you want to send me a name, I will make sure that I put both my email and Leticia's email in the chat, but we have been working really hard to connect with faith-based communities to make sure that they are trained and understand information about intimate partner violence for the same reason that you're learning about it today. Because I don't know one single faith that promotes harm or promotes abuse. It's just more about learning and understanding what is it. And just like I'm not an expert in a certain field, people don't go to seminary or go to a religious training to learn about abuse. And so making sure that they know to get somebody connected to the right resources immediately is probably an extremely high priority.
We do have a question from Melinda Vinicor.
I just wanted to comment that another thing we can do is to put the Marjaree Mason Center contact information in our syllabus. That can reach students who are never going to even tell us anything. And it normalizes that it's okay to reach out to them.
Renee has a question. She's asking, what services does MMC have for people who need accommodations because of physical or intellectual disabilities?
Renee, we often, we will get clients that come in that have those type of challenges. We pull in our partners for that, those that specialize in those arenas. We work a lot with CVRC. That's the first one that comes to the top of my head. A lot of the time, these folks do come in with some type of support behind them, like CVRC or workers. So we're getting the ROIs. We're holding team meetings, sometimes alongside those partnering agencies. So that way we can come up with a plan of care together on how that is going to play out. We've had clients that have had in-home supportive services, so nurses that have had to come in, and we've made exceptions for those clients as well to have those extra support systems come on in to the center as well.
And our center is, our residential facilities are completely confidential. However, if the client signs a waiver and gives you access for communication, we can continue to work with you specifically to make sure that their education is not disrupted. Our facility is ADA accessible, so but the individual does have to be able to physically care for themselves. because we are not a skilled nursing facility here. Any other questions? So yeah, make sure, again, I say this because, you know, having been here for 5 years, I know that specifically people have reached out to my husband Colby to say, hey, I need information on the Marjaree Mason Center. Know how to access us is directly on our website. It's on our social media page. My cell phone doesn't ring 24 hours a day, but however, our hotline does. And so you will fail if you contact me, but you will be successful and be connected to somebody who's trained and ready to help by contacting our hotline and getting connected to those resources.
And we'd like to thank everybody for attending the session today, and particularly from these lovely ladies from the Marjaree Mason Center, because you've given us some fantastic information and resources. And Susie will be sending links to everybody later on today. Thanks so much and have a great weekend. Again, Marjaree Mason Center, thank you so very much for everything. We really appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Marjaree Mason Center, named after her, she would have been so proud, because that's what she was all about. Helping people, helping young ladies achieve their goals and continue on with life.
Personally, I wish I would have spoken up sooner.
I had been in a physically, emotionally, mentally abusive marriage.
Well, I didn't know it was abusive at first because it started verbally.
I thought I was gonna die that night. And by the grace of God, I did not. And I found this place and literally changed my life, so.
The last time he tried to put chlorine in a syringe and he wanted to put it in my vein. And at that moment when that happened, I was just like, he's gonna kill me. I never heard of Marjaree Mason. That's why when I got here, I was like, oh wow, like it saved my life.
Just walking into the building, it was just a sense of peace.
To this day, I'll never forget it. It's gonna get me emotional.
It was a big change, but it was like a good change, you know. I was getting sober, and my children, I've never seen them sleep so comfortable, where I don't have to worry about anyone, you know, busting the door down or, you know, whatever it was.
I have a healthy marriage today, and I have, wonderful relationships with my children.
I'm a teacher, so I'm trying to make a difference, and I'm trying to show my daughters that this is not acceptable.
To get my general ed, I really want to get into criminology. That's what I want.
And I sit here and I know I'm lucky to be alive. And there's many like Marjaree Mason that were not. And it's not worth the gamble.
Just that comfort, of being safe. And it was a big step. I didn't want to leave. But, I ended up leaving, and now I'm with my children and we're all safe.
I really thought I was at the end of my road, that I had to stay.
And just to see how far I've come, and I really do credit the Marjaree Mason Center and this group.
Her death wasn't in vain. It means something. And I know if she was living today, and if she could speak to us today, she would say, job well done.